All right, good morning again. It's good to see all of you. Glad you're here. I hope you had a good week. I want to say hello to all of you who are listening on Facebook Live. Thank you for finding us and tuning in. I do want to say this to you guys who are watching on Facebook. I hadn't said this in a pretty good while. We've spent quite a bit of time and energy making this more pleasing to you. We've invested in a camera and some audio system. And that's our pleasure to do that, and thank you for tuning in every week. But here's the thing. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ and you are physically able to come, we want you here. We really want you here. You need to know that God's plan for your life is to be part of a community of believers so that we can love on you and you can love on us and be accountable to each other. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't never want you to think this is church. This is kind of the appetizer, right? But it's not the meal. The meal is doing life together. And for those of you here lately who has been through some hard times, you know the benefits of church, right? You really know the benefits of church. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I hadn't said it in a while. If you got your Bibles, turn to Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17. We're going to start reading in verse 1 here in just a minute. If you remember, I told you about 3 or 4 weeks ago that starting in March, we were going to start a new book in the Bible. Just like we've done before, go through it from chapter 1, verse 1, all the way through the end. I'm putting that off until after Easter, okay? But in the meantime, starting next week, I'm going to start a series on lostness, about 3 or 4 weeks of sermons on what it means to actually be lost, what it looks like, because I think there's a lot of differing opinions, especially in our American Christianity today. We're going to look at that. I also told you until March that I was going to preach on various topics that are somewhat weighty, right? And they have been weighty. Last week, I talked about God's response to the belittlement of His name, which is what? If you were here, it's hell, right? It's hell. And of course, I'm sure that was a very popular sermon because we all like to think and talk about hell, don't we? No, we really don't, but we need to know about hell, right? The text that I used last week to set that sermon up was Romans chapter 11, verse 22, where the Apostle Paul says, "Take note then of the kindness and the severity of God." Take note then of the kindness and the severity of God. Now, we really love to focus on the kindness of God, don't we? I mean, we really do. And we need to. I mean, it's preached about every single Sunday in every pulpit as well as it should be. But here's the thing. We also need to know the severity of God. So we looked at that. And then 2 weeks ago, we looked at the parable of the sower, where Jesus basically says that there are a lot of people who think they're saved, but they're not actually saved. And he continues that line of thought in Matthew chapter 7, where he says a lot of people are going to come up to him on Judgment Day and say, "Jesus, we know you." And Jesus is going to say what? "But I don't know you. But I don't know you." And so we looked at that. So 2 very, very weighty topics. Today we're going to look at temptations. Where do those temptations come from, and how we really, really need to guard ourselves from temptations. Now, we know one place that they come from. They come from outside, right? They come from the world. But we're also tempted from inside the umbrella of Christianity by false teachers and pastors and things like that. So we're going to look at that. So Luke chapter 17, starting in verse 1, this is Jesus talking here, okay? "And he said to his disciples, 'Temptation to sin are sure to come.'" Let me say that again. "Temptations to sin are sure to come." Now, we know this, right? This is not news to us. We know this, and I am really, really glad Jesus said this, because it makes me feel better. I mean, it really does, because Jesus is saying to his disciples, the ones who have been following him around for 3 years, he's saying to them, listen, temptations to sin are going to come. And I'm really glad he said that. Because, You know this. If you've been at this for a while, you know that it doesn't matter how many times we go to church, how often we read our Bibles, how spiritual we are, that temptations to sin are sure to come. We know that, right? We know that, right? Yeah. We know that. Now, I think doing the things that I just mentioned, they won't help as far as temptations coming, but they will help us resist that temptation. Now, the problem I think we have is really in defining sin, because I think a lot of people are working with a different definition of sin than that of the Bible. I think when we hear that, temptations to sin, we automatically think about something we're struggling with or someone else is struggling with, right? We're thinking about that particular sin when what we should be doing is thinking about why we're doing that sin, that underlying issue, right? So let me say this. The foundational element of all sin, is rooted in pride or idolatry. Okay? From murder to adultery, from lust to lies, every immoral behavior that we call sin is rooted in pride or idolatry, which is why it's so hard for us to break free from that sin. The reason why is because we're trying to deal with that sin instead of trying to get to the underlying issue of that sin. Does that make sense? Let me give you an example. If you have a yard, how many of you have yards? Yeah. If you have a yard, there's weeds in your yard. Did you know that? Yeah, there's weeds in your yard. And the temptation is just to mow over those weeds, right? I mean, that's what I do. I just mow right over the weeds. Every year, Jennifer and I, from spring through fall, we will walk in the afternoon. I mean, we'll exercise, and that gives us a good time to talk to each other and everything like that. A lot of times we'll go to the park, but sometimes we'll just walk around our neighborhood. And I'm telling you, some of our neighbors have some really nice yards. I mean, pristine, green yards. And they get these outfits that come in there, and they spray and stuff like that. I know that for a fact because they have the little stakes in their yard, and, you know, they got that little card said, you know, yard man, or in our area, it's weed man, right? Have you ever heard of weed man? I think that's a hilarious name, don't you? Weed man. But anyway, they have these pristine yards. And every time, I hate walking in our neighborhood because Jennifer's always looking at those yards, and then she looks at me. And it's like, why don't we have a yard like that? And I'm like, I don't want to spend the money, right? I don't want to spend the money. But what I do is I just mow right over the weeds really, really low, because when you do that, the weeds blend in nicely with the grass for about 48 hours. For about 48 hours. But because weeds grow faster than grass, man, I realized very quickly I hadn't got rid of the problem, right? That's what a lot of us do with the sin in our lives. We try to mow right over it instead of uprooting it, but we quickly find out very soon that we hadn't got rid of the problem. And listen, I know everybody in here, you're mature Christians, but listen, we still have issues, right? We still have stuff in the basement. We still have things that we struggle with. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I said, man, how can I have been a Christian for so long and still struggle with this same sin? The reason why is because I hadn't got to the root issue. Does that make sense? So, if the root issue of sin is pride or idolatry, here are the two great temptations that are sure to come. Number one is to take something other than God. To take something other than God and make it your ultimate. Do you know what I mean? That is idolatry. Now, I don't know what that one thing might be for you. For most of us in here, it's not going to be drugs, right? I mean, it's not going to be drugs. It could. For most of us in here, it's going to be something morally neutral or morally pleasing. For most of us in here, we will tend to make our family the ultimate rather than cocaine, right? But still, that's idolatry. That is still idolatry, and it could be anything. It could be your job, it could be your career, it could be money that you're trying to make ultimate. And for most of the time, here's what I've seen, especially with parents. and especially with single mothers, is they make their child their ultimate. Have you ever seen that? I see it all the time. I really do. Jennifer and I, we have some family members, and this precious young woman, she has made her child her ultimate in her life. And you can tell this pretty quickly, right? I mean, you can just read their social media posts, right? I've even seen it to where, they're making a post to their son or daughter, and they said, "You're my reason for living." Have you ever seen something like that? And listen, I know I don't have children, and you can look at me and you say, "Well, you don't understand." But here's what I do understand. Our children shouldn't be our ultimate. That is left for one person and one person only, and his name is Jesus Christ. Am I right? The second temptation that is sure to come is pride. And the way this usually looks is we don't necessarily like all of the God of the Bible, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Can we just be honest? There's some things in this Bible that I don't really like. Anybody else there? Seriously. Yeah. We don't like the God of the Bible, so what we do is we tweak him. You know what I mean? We tweak him a little bit, and we make that God, God. Are you understanding? We will focus only on one attribute of God, and the church that we go to perpetuates that idea. Okay? So, we like to focus on God's kindness and grace and mercy and stuff like that. So we will go to a church that just focuses on that focuses on God's kindness and grace and mercy. But here's what we're doing. We're making God to be about something that he's not, right? And so that's the second one. These are the two great temptations. To make something other than God your ultimate. And listen, I want you to watch this around Christmas time. You'll see this where even in Christian circles, people will say something like, "Well, the reason for the season is what?" They won't say Jesus. What will they say? Family and friends, right? Have you ever heard that? Family and friends. That's making something else ultimate other than God. Let's look at this verse again. Temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. Now, one of the ways we know that temptations to sin come is just through our own sinful heart, right? It's just from our own sinful heart. As Christians, we have two natures. If you look on the front of your bulletin, you see this little guy with an angel on one side and a demon on the other, right? Kind of like the old Tom and Jerry stuff, right? But that's kind of actually pretty accurate for Christians. We have two natures. So one of the ways temptations come from us, they come from us, right? But Jesus says they can also come from outside. So the two sources are from outside the community of faith and from inside the community of faith. All of us know that the world is constantly tempting us to sin, to become more like it than like Jesus, right? Do you know that for a fact? Yeah. This is Satan's plan. And Satan's plan is to do it very subtle, just a little bit at a time. And before we know it, we don't look like foreigners living in a strange land, do we? We look more like citizens of earth than we do citizens of heaven. And you see, that's Satan's plan. Satan doesn't come at me like he used to when I was young. He tempts me in different ways now. How about you? Does he come at you the same way as he did when you were young? No. He tempts us differently as we get older. For me, he tries to do it with pride and self-righteousness and things like that, looking at other Christians who may not read their Bible as much as I do and stuff like that. That's still sin, right? But that's how Satan works. So it comes from outside of the community of faith. But it also comes from inside the community of faith. Did you know that? Yeah. It comes from false pastors, false teachers, authors, and so-called scholars. And I use that term very lightly because anybody can be a scholar today, right? All you got to do is turn on the news and They say, we got an expert here today, and it's like a 15-year-old kid, right? But here's the thing. We can be tempted from inside of the community of faith, again, by false pastors, teachers, authors, scholars. And here's the thing. Most of the time, these people, especially men, but most of the time, these people are very intelligent and very charismatic, right? Large groups of people are not going to follow a dumb person, are they? I mean, they're just really not. Most of the time, these people are very intelligent and very charismatic. Now, let me ask you a question. How do you get a large group of people to follow you other than giving them money? Anybody know? Huh? Brainwash them, okay. Anybody else? You tell them what they want to hear, right? You tell them exactly what they want to hear. You see, for these false teachers and pastors and churches, they just give you just enough of orthodox Christianity to where you're like, yeah, I read that in the Bible somewhere, right? But then what they do is they distort it and they tell you what you want to hear. Paul told a young pastor named Timothy this one time, well over 2,000 years ago in 2 Timothy. And listen, for the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will bring in teachers who will tell them what they want to hear, right? This was 2,000 years ago. Is this not American Christianity today? It is. And again, what they do is they give you just enough Christianity, but they will focus only on one side of God's character, and they will lead hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people astray. But here's what they do when you confront them. They will say something like, well, listen, it must be true because all of these people are following me, right? I mean, that's what they say. If it wasn't true, I wouldn't have all these followers. Well, that's stupid, right? People follow false stuff all the time, don't they? They do. Let's look at it again. Temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. It would be better for him to have a millstone hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea than that he should cause one of these little ones to sin. Okay, so he's basically saying for these false teachers, they may get by with it for a while, but one of these days it's going to go bad. It's going to go really bad. Now, this next part is what I want to focus on. Pay attention to yourselves. Do you see that? Pay attention to yourselves. Why? Why do we need to pay attention to ourselves? Well, because the world is trying to tempt us to sin, right? But the biggest thing for us is these false teachers, these false churches, these false authors and scholars are tempting us to sin. So here's the question. I want you to think about it. How do we pay attention to ourselves? How do we do that? Who said that? What'd you say? Watch what we think. Okay. Yeah. I think an easy thing for us to say is, well, okay, let's read our Bible more and let's read some good, heavy, weighty theological books and stuff like that. Let's go to church on a regular basis. Yes, absolutely. But here's what I think we need to do the most. We need to know what the gospel is not, and we need to know what the gospel is. Do you know what I mean? We need to know what the gospel is not, and we need to know what it is. Let me give you an example. Since I've been coming up here for seems almost a year, almost every day, I frequent a store where an Indian guy is the owner, okay? And a really nice guy. I usually go in there at the same time every day. And somebody told him that I was a minister, okay? After I've been in there a lot of times, someone told him that I was a minister. And so one day I went in there and he said, I hear you are a holy man, right? And at first I just laughed. I was like, you don't know me, right? You don't know. And then I'm like, oh, yes, I am. I like the way that sounded, right? I'm a holy man. But I didn't say that, but I did say, well, I guess I am because of what Christ has done, right? But I'm very, very, very human. And he said, well, I'm Muslim. My name is Muhammad, and I'm Muslim. And I said, well, what kind of Muslim are you? And I swear, this is hilarious. He said, oh, no. I'm peaceful. I'm peaceful. And I just laughed. I said, I'm not asking you if you're a terrorist or anything like that. I mean, are you Shiite or are you Orthodox, whatever. Like that. He said, I'm non-practicing. I'm non-practicing, okay? And I said, well, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Good talking to you. The next time I went in, he said this. He said, how are things in religion? And I said, well, I have no idea. That's not my field. And he was very puzzled, and he said, I thought you were a priest or something like that. And I'm like, again, wrong. But I said, well, I preach the gospel, and the gospel is very, very contrary to religion. And I told him, I said, if you look up the definition of religion, you will see that Christianity wouldn't even qualify to be a religion. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, let me give you an example. I said, Muslims believe that they can be born Muslim. And he said, yes. And I said, your parents may have been Muslim, so you were born Muslim, which is why you can be a non-practicing Muslim. And he said, yes. And I said, well, you can't be born a Christian. I said, it doesn't matter if your parents were Christians or whatever. I said, you can't be born a Christian, and there is no such thing as non-practicing Christians. And he said, well, you're wrong. And I said, no, there's no such thing as non-practicing Christian. He said, I see them all the time. And I said, no, what you see are people who grew up in church and they were baptized when they were little, and they think they're Christians, but yet they have no relationship with Christ. There's no pursuing Jesus whatsoever. They just think that. And this guy was astonished. He was completely astonished. But I'm telling you guys, I used to talk to a lot of people on a regular basis about Christ. For some reason, I don't do that as much anymore. But I have here lately, and especially among young people, they have no idea. They have no idea what the gospel is. They have no idea what Christianity is. They see it as a religion, which is tragic. I talked to a young lady about a week ago, a beautiful, beautiful young lady. And I was doing some counseling with her. And I asked her, I said, okay, I need you to explain to me salvation, what it means to be a Christian in the gospel. She said this, I was baptized when I was 8 years old, and then at 14 I was baptized in a Mormon church. But now I'm coming back, I want to be a Baptist, and I'm trying to find a church, and I know if I try to be really, really good, I can go to heaven. I didn't break down then, but later on I just broke down and cried. But I'm telling you, guys, that's the idea out there. That's the idea of the gospel and what Christianity is and how you go to heaven. Let me tell you what the gospel is not. What I just said, that's not the gospel. The gospel is not a philosophy either. A lot of people think that Christianity is a philosophy. It's not. The gospel is not, I'm okay and you're okay, and if we would just be who God wanted us to be, then that would be it. That's not the gospel. The worst thing you can do is be you. You need to become someone else, and that only happens through the gospel. The gospel is also not, if I'm good, I can go to heaven. That's not the gospel. The gospel is this: the triune God created everything for His glory and for us to rejoice in everything to glorify Him. Do you understand that? That means when we eat food, we should see the glory of God. Any blessing out there that God gives us, we are supposed to take that. It's not supposed to end on itself. We are supposed to eat a steak. I told you this one time. A lost man eats a steak and said, man, that's a good steak. A saved person says, that's a good steak. Glory be to God. I can't believe you would arrange my taste buds in such a way that I can enjoy this steak. Glory to God. That's the difference. God created everything for His glory and for us to appreciate His glory. But we sinned against Him. He sent His Son to live a perfect life for us and die a sacrificial death for us. And He raised Him from the dead, which proves that God accepted His sacrifice. And if we would put our faith and trust in Him, we become a new creation. And when God sees us, He sees us as holy and spotless and blameless. And we spend the rest of our lives not perfect, but pursuing Jesus. That's the gospel. Any deviation from that is false teaching. And I'm telling you, it's out there. It's out there. So let me ask you a question. Are you guarding yourself? Are you watching what kind of books you read or what you listen to? Because to me, I think the tragedy for us here in America as Christians is the world don't see us very much different than the rest of the world. Do you know what I mean? My neighbors are not Christians. Actually, they're totally against Christianity. They're really good people. They really are. They're good parents. They're really good people. And I'm asking myself, do I look any different than they do? Do I look any different? Do people see me any different? We're not better. We're not better than anyone. We shouldn't act smug, well, I'm a Christian. But we should be different. Are you different? Are you guarding your heart? Are you guarding your mind? Are you making sure you're following, you're in the right church or things like that? Are you guarding yourself? Because you can be led astray very, very easily. Does any of this make sense? Let's pray. Father God,